Joe, in the news again this week was the former Florida head coach and Ohio State head coach, Urban Meyer, and he had some massive comments. Joe, he said that if you would have told him 10 years ago that the Big Ten was better than the SEC, he would have told you you're crazy. But now in a new era, he thinks that the Big Ten is a better conference than the SEC. He also brought in there that he thought the national titles and winning the last two were big reasons for that. When you talk about the Big Ten and the SEC and the best conference, who do you think it is and why?
Okay, I'm not going to give you the bulletin board material. I'm not going to sit here and just straight up say what you want me to say. I'm not going to do it. But I disagree with Urban Meyer. That is what you'll get from me. I disagree with Urban Meyer. I'm not going to.
What do you disagree with him on?
The Big Ten has not surpassed the SEC. It is still, I don't think anything has changed. That's the biggest part with this. Nobody is separating from anybody. The same premier brands are the same premier brands that rule college football. Michigan and Ohio State are the two teams, with Penn State trailing behind. They haven't been a national championship winning team in a very long time, but they're still competitive. That's it in the conference. Oregon's done some good things. USC's done some good things. But they had to go and get teams from outside the conference to bring them in order to increase the national championship pedigree of the conference. I say this to say, Blake, we know that the SEC has won more national titles in the last 20 years. In the modern era of the 14 playoff, the BCS, and the expanded playoff, the SEC has consistently had some of the top teams in the country. So what is Urban talking about? He's coached in both conferences. How are we going to make a statement like that off of 2 years where Michigan and Ohio State won it? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, he also degrades his legacy in saying that 10 years ago that he wasn't coaching in the better conference. Right?
Well, he's not saying that the SEC wasn't good.
No, he said that if you would have told him 10 years ago when he was coaching that the Big Ten was better than the SEC, he would have called you crazy.
Yes, that's what he said.
Right. So basically, you couldn't win in a 12-year period. You won one national title. Joe, it took Ohio State 12 years to reach the pinnacle in both times. Like they're tied for second. One school in the Big Ten's tied for second for national titles over the last 25 years. Now, if we want to call a spade, the SEC and the Big Ten in the last 40 years are split at 2-2 apiece. Joe, it took you 12 years if you're the Big Ten to win natties. Are we basing, and here would be my argument. I see people basing this off of bowl games from last year. And I'm not going to rehash this with you about the South Carolina thing. People want to point at Michigan and say, well, they beat Bama. Okay, good deal. I'm with you. They also beat the national champion. The national champion. They don't, with all due respect to Ohio State's season, that same Michigan team dicked you down and made you look foolish. So you're blaming a 9-3 Bama team when the Ohio State team lost. Hold on.
Okay.
They lost. They got dicked down offensively by Michigan. Did they not? They scored 10 points.
Yes. I think that if we get two in the weeds, I'm just saying if you get two in the weeds with this, I think it's really easy to get off track. I think that this simple talking point is national championships and national championship caliber teams.
I don't think that national champions is what you should all base off of what's the better conference.
I think you should. Why wouldn't you base that? It should be national championships and teams per year that you produce that are capable of winning.
Okay, well, then it's an onslaught then. If that's what you're going to dictate, is national champions rule your conference. Well, Saban's out. Well, the last time that you got a conference team in there, one of the coaches in Michigan is gone. The other one's at Alabama. The only one left is Ryan Day. So one's left and one's in the SEC. So is that we're getting your coaches then? Secondly, I would also say this. I understand it took 12 years for you to win national titles. You're not even full on second behind Bama in national titles. You're tied for second with LSU. Joe, if that's the case, we're talking about six teams in the SEC have won natties. I don't know if I completely based it off of that. I also do look into how many times the SEC has won in draft picks like they did again this year, I think that's a massive standing point. I mean, all right, don't take this the wrong way. I don't know. I'm not saying Georgia beats Notre Dame. What does Georgia do with Carson Beck? Like, there are.
Okay, come on. Okay, come on. But can we not do this? Can we not do this angle? Because I don't think
you can't say that the SEC's champion, who beat Texas with Carson Beck, that took Ohio State to the wire, we don't know what they would be.
They beat Texas with Gunnar Stockton in the SEC championship game.
They played 6 quarters with Carson Beck.
Okay, but here's where you're in this argument while we're trying to make this argument. When we start to go down the what if road, it automatically pulls credibility out of the conversation. Like it completely takes it out of it. Like,
but that is what the conversation is.
No.
What if from Big Ten, is it not?
No. What I'm trying to say, Blake, is that if we start doing the what ifs with Georgia and their injury situation, we're distracting ourselves. I know. I think that the main focus here is that if we just look in the last 10 years alone, we've had 2 Big Ten teams that have consistently been in the national championship conversation. It's been Ohio State and it's been Michigan. They're in the years where they have been as competitive and as good as they have been, those have been the only 2 teams that we talk about every single year. And Michigan has been down for a good period of time during the Jim Harbaugh era and before the Jim Harbaugh era. In the SEC, we have had different programs when they have geared up at the right times that have become competitive and that have been good enough to be in the national championship conversation. Most importantly, and I think that, like, if we want to take this even further, 2 of the greatest teams of all time have come in the last 10 years, and they came from Georgia and they came from LSU.
Right.
2019 LSU and 2022 Georgia. So we can't say the same thing for an Ohio State team or a Michigan team. Those were great teams, but they were not on that same level.
Joe, I want to throw this out there too. I do find it contradictory from Urban, who literally said that the Michigan coaching staff last week, if they're found guilty, should not be allowed back in college football. See, he's taking a shot at Michigan, but if you're going to do that, then you're going to degrade with their national championship run. I see Elk's already sending a super chat saying the SEC is made up or is undefeated in made up games. Well, Elks, you ran in here and said that their national championship was fraud. It was a fraud.
Well, that takes away from the argument completely.
It takes away from the argument. So if you're going to call, if you're Urban Meyer, if you're going to call that Michigan team and that staff fraudulent, then you can only have it one way. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say that you're the best conference and one of the national title teams that you're talking about, that the coaches should be banned from the sport. Banned from the sport. Get out of here with me with that, man. Can you hear me?
I lost you there for a second. You still there? Yeah, you still there?
I said get out of. Can you hear me?
Well, no, I heard what you said. And look, I completely agree with you. And I think that we can't have 2 different types of arguments. We need to live in the same world here, like you're just talking about now. Ohio State fans and Elks, I don't think that you're one of these people, and I don't think all Ohio State fans are like this, but I think generally Big Ten fans are going to speak very critically of what Michigan has done. The only people who support Michigan are me, who's crazy, and Michigan fans. We can't say that what they did was a fake championship because they cheated their way towards it and then use it in the conversation of who has been truly the more dominant conference. I think that our perception and our angle of this is completely affected by the fact that this past year we had some good, not great, not elite, good Big Ten teams, and a lot of the SEC was eating up on itself. I will still stand by the SEC was down this year. It was not as good of a conference as it has been. It's been its worst year in the last 20 years, it feels like. But they're going to rebound.
Since 2015, for sure.
They will, at the very least, bounce back this upcoming year. And we've already done a bunch of SEC previews. There's a lot of proof that they've got a lot of young, developing, explosive teams that are funneling resources in order to be back in national championship conversations. It was just very bad timing for where it was. If we go back to 2023, would we say that there was that same level of separation where the SEC was, quote, down and then the Big Ten was so much better than it? No, we wouldn't.
You know why? Because if you're going to go based off of bowl games that year, remember LSU hung 70 on Wisconsin or Purdue.
Right.
They hung 56 on Wisconsin. That's what you're telling me that the average is, right? You're telling me that bowl games play a massive factor. Well, Jane Daniels went stupid. Joe was the start of his Heisman run. Like, what do we?
Yeah.
He had 400 yards and a half. What? Like, what? I'm with you there. I thought you would go Big Ten. Now, let me say this before we get out of here. Let the Big Ten win another national title, then you do have to bring up the question. I don't think that Urban is completely off in the aspect of that they are on the rise. But to say that they've taken over completely in this standpoint, Joe, I think is a bit much, right? Like, I think it's a bit much. Now, if Penn State goes out there and wins a national title, then what? Then, Joe, they've won 3 straight. Then you really have to have a discussion, okay? Then, because you really, really do. But here's where I stand on this. Joe, Texas goes up to Ohio State week 1. And if Texas goes in there and beats them but loses the SEC again, then what? See, my question would be Penn State and Oregon have got to prove that they can go in there and actually win one. See, there are 5 other teams, technically 6 in the Southeast. By the way, 6 in the Southeast in the last 10 years, or 4 teams in the last 10 years, have proven they can go on national title runs. Clemson, Bama, Georgia, LSU. Like that, by the way, last thing before I turn it over to you. The reason that we expanded the playoff was because the SEC was so dominant. Right? Everybody thought that it was
we did it for money.
No,
come on.
We did it for money.
I don't know if it's that deep. It's for money.
Take the money out of it. Us as fans, the people that are for expansion, they said the sport had become too regional. Did they not? Joe, 2-3 years ago, we were talking. Joe, we have arguments that are on this platform that we can pull up because the talking point was that everybody thought that the sport was too regional. And then when Washington came out of nowhere, everybody was glad that a team from the West Coast had that opportunity. Everybody was.
We expanded the playoff to make more money.
I said take the money out of it. It's a fan who doesn't dictate anything. It's just a fan of the sport.
But the fans don't decide playoff expansion. I reject this part of the argument.
People for expansion, did they or did they not think that regionality of the sport had become too centralized to one specific area?
I think that it was brought up. I don't think that it was such a concern that they thought that they had.
And why are they doing auto bids? I mean, they did auto bids mainly due to the point that they said that they did not want it. Equality was their excuse. That's bullshit. They wanted more teams in different time zones to be a part of college football. Bullshit.
Peel back for a second. The auto bids were created because the commissioners of the ACC and the Big 12 would never have agreed to the playoff and to participate in it if they were going to get singled out. Everybody wants to have footing to be able to participate in it. All these conferences want to be able to make money. I don't think that it was. I don't totally agree with the angle that you're going at with here.
Well, it's still true.
Okay. You brought up a point that I just want to return to.
Okay.
You brought up, I think that my big focus is if we really want to start, if the Big Ten wants to make the argument that they are starting to catch up to the SEC and they're passing the SEC, as you just said, Oregon and Penn State, they need to lead the national championship conversation this year. They need to. And we've talked about them. They're both in the position to do so. There's question marks, but they're in a position to do so.
You said Penn State and who else?
Oregon. Because the reason why they need them to be...
I don't know if you can put that on Oregon. Are we sure that they can be a national title caliber team? We haven't seen the Cougars throw a pass in 2 years.
the reason why I'm putting it on them is because Oregon, it's their second year in the conference. They're now officially a Big Ten team. Anything that they've done prior does not count towards the conversation of what the Big Ten can accomplish. So if a newcomer to the conference that has all this money that they're funneling into all the resources, all their NIL, all that stuff, if they can get to a national championship or the Final Four, that paints the picture for how the Big Ten suddenly has a contender. And if Penn State lives up to their expectation, where we in the past 10 years have spent so much time talking about, man, they're really good, but they're just not ready to get over the hump. If they can actually prove themselves in a matchup against an SEC team in the playoff and reach the national championship, that also paints the picture. Like they need, my whole point is they need representation outside of Ohio State and Michigan to reach the national championship, to win a national championship, because right now they cannot make that claim that their conference is as deep as what the SEC is.
I do think we got caught up on semantics on me trying to make the point.
Okay.
Regardless, if they win another one, we can have the discussion. Because to be the man, you got to beat the man. And you haven't thrown a knockout punch to beat the man yet. You've won by decision, so to speak. You're tied in national titles in the last 4 years. Joe, I'm going to tell you, from SEC fans, if Texas goes up to Ohio State and wins, they're going to say what? I mean, because you can't blame that there's a new quarterback. You can't blame that there's defenders that just went into the draft. You can't complain about offensive line. You can't complain about anything. You can't complain about money. Right? Like, I mean, you can't. It's just a recruiting thing. I will throw this out there to end it. Joe, how many coaches in the Big Ten have been at their schools for quite a while? The SEC over the last 5 years have gone through massive coaching changes, none bigger than Nick Saban leaving Alabama. Brian Kelly came to the conference. Billy Napier came to the conference. Mike Elko came to the conference. Steve Sarkisian in a 4-year window along with Josh Heupel, Brent Venables, Jeff Lebby. Joe, that's almost half the conference had to completely restart. We gave Ryan Day how long to win an Natty? We have a dude at Penn State that still hasn't won one. The SEC had a long tenure of dudes that were in their conference, guys that were bringing them to the national titles. They had to go through a massive overhaul. So everybody keeps talking to me about why the SEC's been down, okay, or was down this year. Joe, I do feel it's kind of hit ahead, and then they're going to start rebuilding back to what they were, in my humble opinion. But you can't look at half the conference and say that their coaches left and say that they didn't have some form of a rebuild. Every conference has to recycle. It happened in 2015. Joe, Les Miles, who had coached in 2 national titles, had to reset. Auburn had to get a new head coach. Georgia had to start looking for a new head coach. By the way, here comes Kirby Smart. Joe, he's still at Bama at this point. So the last time that the conference was down was the last time that conferences or the SEC went through that big of a massive change with coaches 3 years within their school. And I throw in Sark and Heupel because it's a 4-year window. But, I mean, look, man, I'm not there yet on the SEC. I do agree the SEC being down. I do think they cannibalize themselves.
Yep.
But, man, you better miss me with some of this stuff. I mean, you win 2 national titles and you didn't win one for 12 years. Oh, we're on top. Get out of my face with that shit.
I for some reason, it's funny when we do the show, by the way, because like everyone thinks, and you especially think I'm like super anti-SEC, but like you hate the SEC. My friends think it the opposite. Well, but yeah, people will text me after I do a segment like this, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, Joe, here you go, SEC Joe, here he comes again," because I'm suddenly supporting the SEC, even though I have no reason to. I'm not from the South. I'm from the Northeast. I have more ties to people that went to school in the Midwest. But I think that the my final thought with this, and why last year we believed that the SEC was as down as they were, which they were. That conference has a lot more money to throw around than every single team in the Big Ten. Almost every single team in the SEC, it's not the same amount of money, have money to spend on facilities, coaches, recruits, transfer portal players, all of that. So when you have a conference in that all representing the same region, it's all fighting for those same resources, you're going to cannibalize yourself. But we have in the Big Ten, got 5 big brands that can put up that same level of financial commitment. 5-6 brands. USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. Maybe we could throw in Washington in that conversation. Am I missing anybody? That's the extent of it. That's not even half the conference with how big the conference is now. I would argue 3/4 of the SEC has the ability, if they put their head down and put money towards building a championship team, can all do it.
Texas, LSU, Florida.
Yes.
Okay.
Alabama,
Auburn, Georgia.
Ole Miss showed that they could last year.
I was going to throw in Tennessee. I'm not going to throw in Ole Miss. You got to actually win one in the last 70 years. I would say Tennessee, but I do think that you're getting a little bit much there for me. If you do or don't add Tennessee in there, that's fine. But here's the problem with what you're saying. Outside of Texas, all of those teams have won national titles. That is the crux of it. Florida, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Bama have all won it. So